When I came to reconcile after years, my family sat me at the kids' table with plastic utensils. My sister's dog had a place card. I had a napkin with "stranger" written on it. My dad took a family photo and cropped me out before posting it. My niece asked why the crying lady was there. I left before dessert, until I mailed each of them an envelope that said only one word. When I walked into my parents' house after 6 years of silence, I thought I was ready. I wasn't. The smell of roasted turkey hit me first, the same scent that used to mean comfort, laughter, family. But the looks I got from everyone said something different this time. My sister's smile froze halfway, my dad's jaw tightened, and my mom just said, "Oh, you made it." There was a table set up beautifully in the dining room, polished wood, candles, matching silverware, place cards and calligraphy. And then there was the folding table in the corner, with cartoon plates, plastic utensils, and one paper napkin with "stranger" scrawled across it in red marker. That was my seat. I thought maybe it was a joke. Until I saw that my sister's golden retriever buddy had his own place card with a tiny bow tie on his collar. The family laughed when the dog barked and took my seat, thinking he was supposed to. No one told him otherwise. I ended up sitting anyway, quietly, trying to ignore the way my hands shook when my niece, who was maybe 5, whispered to her mom, "Why is the crying lady here?" Dinner went on like I wasn't there. My dad made a toast about forgiveness and moving forward, without once looking at me. Every photo they took somehow had me off to the side, out of focus. Until I watched my dad later, phone in hand, carefully cropping me out before posting "family together again" read on Facebook. Something inside me cracked. I'd spent years rebuilding myself after what they did, after being made the scapegoat for something I didn't even do. I came to make peace, not to be humiliated. But sitting there, watching them clink glasses while I sipped from a plastic cup, I realized something sharp and cold. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted an audience for my shame. So I stood up quietly and said I had to go before dessert. My mother didn't even look up from the pie she was slicing. My sister muttered, "Figures." My dad said nothing. But when I got home, I pulled out a stack of envelopes. I wrote one word on the front of each, the same word they'd given me, "stranger." And inside each envelope, I placed something they'd never forget. What I mailed them didn't look dangerous at first, but it would tear their perfect family image apart, one by one. Because if they wanted a stranger, I was about to show them just how cold a stranger could be. 6 years ago, I was the family disgrace. It started when my parents' business, a small construction company my dad ran for 30 years, got audited. Someone had reported them for falsifying invoices. I was working part-time in their office back then, doing admin work after college. When the IRS showed up, my dad immediately blamed me, said I must have filed something wrong, said I'd cost the family thousands in penalties. I was 24, scared, completely blindsided. The truth was, I had found the fake invoices months earlier. My dad had been billing clients for materials never bought, padding numbers, and pocketing the difference. I confronted him quietly. He told me to stay in my lane and that family loyalty comes before paperwork. I stayed quiet, thinking I was protecting him. Then the audit came. He flipped it all on me. I remember the night he told everyone, my mom, my sister, even her husband, that I'd stolen from the business. He made it sound like I was greedy, ungrateful, and ashamed of being caught. He said I forged numbers for easy money. My mom cried like someone had died. My sister called me a liability. They didn't even let me explain. Within a week, I was fired, disowned, and publicly humiliated. Word spread fast in our small town. No one would hire me. Friends ghosted me. I packed up my car and drove to Seattle with $700 and no plan. I worked any job I could get, waitressing, cleaning Airbnb rentals, eventually landing a data entry position for a construction firm that didn't know my last name. I never told anyone about what happened. I just rebuilt my life quietly, paycheck by paycheck. Years passed. Then, last summer, my mom emailed me for the first time in years. She wrote, "We think enough time has passed. Maybe you'd like to come home for Thanksgiving. Dad says family should forgive and forget." Forgive and forget. I stared at those words for hours before I said yes. I wanted to believe they meant it. That maybe they'd realized what they'd done to me. That maybe my dad's pride had softened with age. But when I showed up, it was all for show. The smiles, the prayers before dinner, the fake warmth, all for appearances. They didn't want to make amends. They wanted to make sure I still knew my place, beneath them. That night, when I drove home shaking and humiliated, something in me hardened. If they still saw me as the problem, then maybe it was time to become one. So I opened my old laptop, dug through backed up files, and found what I'd saved 6 years ago: copies of those falsified invoices, bank statements, and an email chain my dad sent using company accounts that proved exactly what he'd done. I had evidence, proof that everything he'd accused me of was really his doing, and I knew exactly how to use it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my floor with the folder open, years of proof laid out like ghosts. My dad's emails, fake invoices, client statements, even a few old voice memos I'd recorded when I was panicking, trying to make sense of what was happening. Back then, I'd thought about turning him in. But every time, my mom's voice echoed in my head, "Don't destroy this family over a mistake." So I didn't. I let him destroy me instead. Now, I wasn't out for blood. Not yet. I just wanted them to see me. To know what they'd done. But the more I stared at those documents, the more something inside me shifted, not anger exactly. Something quieter, more deliberate. I started small. Each envelope had one piece of proof. A page that, on its own, didn't seem too harmful, but would raise questions. For my sister, I printed the email where Dad had told me to fix the numbers before sending them to the client, with his full signature and date. For my mom, I included a fake invoice she'd co-signed, probably without realizing it. For Dad, I chose something more personal, a letter he'd sent to an old client, apologizing for clerical errors and promising to make it right. The same letter he'd later said I forged. Each envelope had just one word on the front: stranger, no return address. I mailed them from 3 different post offices across the city. Then I waited. The first call came 3 days later, my sister. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was panicked. "What the hell is this? Did you send this? What are you doing?" By the next day, Mom texted, "Your father is very upset. Whatever game you're playing, stop before you embarrass yourself further." Embarrass myself. That made me laugh out loud in my empty apartment. A week later, the voicemail from Dad came. His voice was tight and controlled. "You don't want to start something you can't finish, sweetheart. Family secrets should stay buried. You understand." But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd already started something much bigger than they imagined. Because while they were scrambling to figure out who sent the envelopes, I'd uploaded every piece of evidence I had to a secure drive. Then, I reached out to someone who might actually care. A local journalist who had covered corruption in small businesses. I didn't give my name. I just sent her the files. She replied within 24 hours. Her message was simple: "If this is real, we need to talk." And it was real. Very real. Still, I wasn't prepared for what came next, or for who else was about to get dragged into this. Because I wasn't the only one my dad had lied to. There was someone else, someone I didn't even know existed until she called me out of nowhere. And what she told me changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The call came from an unknown number on a Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. "Hi, is this, Megan Carter?" The voice on the other end was nervous, young, maybe mid-20s. "My name's Jordan. I think we need to talk." I think we might be sisters." I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "You've got the wrong person," I said. "No," she said quietly. "I don't think I do. Your dad is Michael Carter, right? He used to work with my mom at Ridgeview Construction." My stomach dropped. Ridgeview was the name of one of my dad's old contracting clients, the same company whose fake invoices I'd found years ago. Jordan continued, her voice trembling. "My mom passed away last year. I found some letters when I was cleaning out her house from your dad. They were personal. And there was one that said, 'I'll find a way to be in her life eventually.'" I felt the world tilt sideways. She was 25, just a year younger than me. And when she sent me a picture of the letter, written in the same slanted handwriting I'd seen on my birthday cards all my life, there was no denying it. My father had another daughter, and he'd kept it secret for decades. I sat on my couch in silence for a long time, staring at the screen. I thought about all the years he'd accused me of betrayal, all the speeches about family loyalty, all the times he'd shamed me for being ungrateful. And here he was, the man who'd built his reputation on family and faith, hiding an entire human being like a bad business deal. I asked Jordan what she wanted from me. She said, "I don't want anything, I think you should know, because I think he's done to you what he did to my mom. Lied, blamed, disappeared." She was right. Over the next week, we talked almost every day. She told me how her mom met my dad when he was still married, how he promised he'd leave, how she believed him. But when she got pregnant, he vanished. She never told anyone who the father was, and she raised Jordan alone. The kicker? Her mom had worked for Ridgeview Construction, one of the companies my dad used for his fake invoices. He hadn't just lied to his family. He'd used that woman and probably her name in his scams. That's when everything clicked. The money trail I found in his old statements, the client reimbursements that never made sense, they were connected to her. To Jordan's mom. The clerical errors that had supposedly been my fault were payments to cover his secret life. My dad had built his family business on lies and infidelity, and when the walls closed in, he chose the easiest scapegoat, me. For 6 years, I'd carried that shame while he posted Bible quotes about forgiveness online. Now, I had proof of every ugly truth he'd buried. And I had someone who could back me up, someone with his handwriting, his letters, his promises. Jordan didn't want revenge, but I did. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly how to destroy him, not with violence, but with exposure. The only question was when to strike. When Jordan and I finished our long, trembling call, the fog of shock cleared into something sharp and efficient. I hadn't woken up that morning thinking I'd become a strategist. But there I was, mapping out steps on the back of an old takeout receipt like a woman designing a siege. This wasn't melodrama, it was logistics. They'd built a tidy life on lies. I was going to turn those lies into a slow, undeniable collapse. First rule, evidence speaks louder than pain. I already had documents, invoices, and emails, but I needed chain of custody, something that made it impossible to bury as an old grudge. So I scanned everything into a new cloud account under a burner email, time-stamped copies, PDFs, and metadata intact. I cross-checked dates. I annotated the pieces that tied directly to deposits into accounts, to checks signed in his name, to clients who'd complained. I created a single file that read like a story: motive, method, receipts. It had a beginning, a middle, and a punch you couldn't ignore. Second rule, control the narrative. My dad was a man who curated sympathy. He'd framed me as the shameful child so long that people would default to believing him. I needed an impartial eye who could turn documents into reporting. That journalist, I messaged her again, gave her a cropped summary, and offered an anonymous interview. She didn't like anonymous. I didn't want to be anonymous forever. But I needed time. She asked for corroboration. I gave her names and a few flagged emails. She said she could follow the money if she could get more proof. That put us on a clock. Third rule. Quiet allies. I reached out to 2 people from my small town who still mattered, not family, but people who'd been hurt by the fallout years ago. An ex-client who'd paid for materials that never arrived, and a former foreman who'd quit after his paycheck bounced. Neither wanted public drama, but both wanted truth. They agreed to speak to the reporter on background if she could prove the documents authentic. That was enough to make the case credible. Fourth rule, emotional economy. I had to be surgical with pain. I didn't want to pulverize them in a way that left no room for nuance. I wanted exposure, humiliation that matched what they'd given me, and a public correction of the story that had erased me. That meant timing, not a scattershot reveal, but a sequence. Envelopes had been the opening salvo, small, insistent, unnerving. The journalist's story would be the middle. A civil complaint or an IRS tip, I'd confirmed whistleblower channels exist, would be the endgame to ensure consequences, not just gossip. Fifth rule, safety and sanity. I told Jordan to keep our conversations off social media and to not mention the journalist. We both changed our phone pins and used a new messaging app with disappearing messages. I thought about the risks, countersuits, threats, my dad calling the cops, and I planned for them. I stored copies of everything on a thumb drive hidden in a friend's house and printed a backup copy mailed to a P.O. box in a neighboring town. The part that felt worst was how strategic I had to be with family. The envelopes shook them, they panicked. But panic lasts a week. I needed legal and journalistic pressure to last months. So I worked on leverage that wasn't paper. Calls to long-ignored clients, quiet questions to the town accountant about inconsistencies, and a soft nudge to my dad's banker with an anonymous tip about possible fraud. These moves were scalpel precise, not dramatic. By the seventh day, the journalist told me she had enough to run a preliminary piece if I would go on record. The thought of facing them in public scared me in a way their taunts never did. But I pictured my niece asking why the crying lady had been at Thanksgiving, and I wanted her to someday understand that I wasn't a stranger. I wanted the truth to exist in the world. Then something else happened, something that wasn't on any of my lists, something so personal and unexpected it flung open the door to a new kind of betrayal. Jordan called at midnight, and when she finally stopped sobbing, said, "There's someone else, and they know things that change everything." I didn't know whether to feel triumphant or sick. Jordan's voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "He's been calling me," she said. "A man named Rick. He says he used to work with your dad. He says he knows what happened to your job and to your mom's money." My stomach turned cold. Rick, the name hit me like static. My dad used to talk about a Rick Turner, his right-hand guy at the company. The one he always bragged was loyal to the end. "He found me through my mom's old Facebook," Jordan said. "He said your dad owes him, that he's been sitting on something for years." I didn't want to believe it, but when Rick called me 2 days later, I recognized his voice immediately, slow, gravelly, self-satisfied. "Hey, Megan," he said. "Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again. Guess the truth's catching up to Mike." "What do you want?" I asked flatly. He chuckled. "Nothing from you, just figured you'd want to know the whole story. You didn't get fired because of that audit, sweetheart. You got fired because you almost caught me and your daddy pulling numbers from 2 payrolls. You remember those extra payments that didn't match the books?" My breath caught. I remembered. I'd flagged those as errors years ago, thinking I'd saved the company a mistake. My dad had told me not to touch them again. "That wasn't a mistake," Rick said. "That was us double-billing clients and running the extra through a shell account. But when you spotted it, he panicked. Said you were getting too close, so he framed you. Told me to rewrite the reports, make it look like you were cooking the books. Said you'd never recover, but at least the company would." I didn't speak for a while. My throat felt raw, like I'd swallowed fire. He wasn't finished. He made me sign a non-disclosure when the audit hit, paid me 50 grand to disappear, but he never sent the last payment. So when I heard your name again, I figured maybe karma's finally spinning around. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Rick laughed. "Nothing except to see that smug son of a bitch burn. You want proof? I've got bank transfers, emails, everything. He used your name on half of them. Thought that was smart until now." That was the moment I realized what kind of man my father really was. Not just a liar, not just a coward, but someone who would forge his own daughter's identity to hide his crimes. Rick sent the files the next morning. They matched everything I had down to dates and invoice numbers. My dad had literally signed my name on fake documents. My life had fallen apart because he'd needed a fall guy, and he didn't even hesitate to make that person me. Jordan and I stayed on the phone for hours that night. She kept apologizing for dragging Rick into it, but I told her she hadn't. This was the missing piece, the one thing that would make the story airtight. I forwarded everything to the journalist. She called me 10 minutes later, her voice almost trembling. "Megan, this is huge. This isn't just a family story anymore. This is felony fraud." And that's when I knew what I was going to do next. I wasn't just going to expose my father to the world, I was going to make him live in the ruins he'd built. But I also knew that once the truth came out, it would crush more than just him. My mom, my sister, everyone who'd stood by him and laughed at that dinner table. Because when they finally learned why he'd really destroyed me, and who he'd done it for, they'd never look at him, or each other, the same way again. And that reason, that cold, horrifying reason, was something even I wasn't ready to hear. When the journalist called me back 2 days later, she sounded different, not excited, not curious, just quiet. Careful. "Megan," she said, "before we move forward, you need to see something I found. It's about your dad's other daughter, about Jordan." I froze. "What about her?" She hesitated. "You said her mom worked at Ridgeview Construction, right?" "The payroll department." "Yeah," I said slowly. "Well," the journalist said, "I pulled the company's old tax filings. There's a second account listed under the same EIN. It's labeled Employee Child Assistance Fund." It only has two beneficiaries. Your dad and your sister, Laura. My heart dropped. My sister? Yes, she said softly. It looks like your sister helped your dad move money through Ridgeview using that fake fund. She signed the forms. And here's the part that'll make you sick. One of those payments was labeled as tuition support for minor dependent. Jordan T., your father wasn't just hiding Jordan. He was paying for her life through your sister's name. They both knew. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just him. My sister, the same one who'd laughed when I sat at the kids' table, who called me a liar for years, she'd been helping him launder money that went towards supporting his secret child. The reason my father ruined me wasn't to protect his company. It was to protect her. The journalist kept talking, but her words blurred. My dad hadn't scapegoated me out of pride. He'd done it to cover his affair, to keep his perfect family intact. And Laura had gone along with it. Because if it ever came out that Dad had a second family, her husband would have left, the town would have turned on them, and the business would have crumbled. They used me because I was already the quiet one, the black sheep, the one who never fought back loud enough. I sat there, replaying every moment from that Thanksgiving dinner, the smirk on Laura's face, the way she called me predictable. She knew. She'd always known. That was the real cruelty of it all. My father forged my name, but my sister signed off on it. They built a whole false world together while telling me I was the shame. When I told Jordan, she didn't even sound surprised. I think he loved her more, she said softly. He loved her because she helped him hide me. That line gutted me. I realized then that the man I'd called Dad didn't love anyone. Not me, not Laura, not even Jordan. He loved control. That was his God. Every lie, every smile, every prayer at the dinner table, all just tools to keep his throne intact. And when control slipped, he didn't hesitate to destroy whoever threatened it. The journalist said, "I'm publishing this Sunday. You should prepare for fallout." But I already knew there was no preparing. Because before the world learned what kind of man he was, they were going to learn first, in a way they'd never forget. I was done being their scapegoat. It was time to give them the truth, in public, in their own words, with their own signatures. The final move was already in motion. When the Sunday piece went live, it felt like someone had opened a window in a house I'd been living in with the shades slammed. The reporter laid it out clean: emails, bank transfers, the Shell account, Laura's signatures, Rick's testimony, Jordan's birth records. No melodrama, just receipts and dates and the hard lines of evidence. I watched the comments as they rolled in, felt the world split along the seam my father had sown. My phone blew up. My sister texted first. "We need to talk. Now." My dad called twice and left a voicemail that sounded like he was rehearsing an apology he didn't mean. My mom's number went straight to voicemail. The town feed filled with people I'd known since kindergarten. Half were in denial. Half were angry for me. I drove to my parents' house that night because I knew I didn't want to watch it from my couch. I wanted to see their faces when the word fraud stopped being a rumor and started being a headline. I wanted to be more than the crying lady at someone else's table. They met me in the kitchen, and Laura's face was white like she'd seen a ghost. Dad couldn't meet my eyes. He clutched the counter like he might slide off. Mom kept glancing at the TV, where the reporter was scrolling through a PDF of evidence. It was grotesque and perfect. "You did this," Laura said, voice small. "You sent those envelopes." I looked at her and felt an old, private heat pass through me, the humiliation, the years of being told I was the liar. "I sent the envelopes," I said. "Then I sent everything else." Her mouth opened and closed. "Why would you?" "Because you helped him," I said. "Because you signed for his lies. Because you let me be the one to take the fall while you lived clean." She started to cry then, not the quiet, private kind, but the sharp, surprised sob that comes when someone realizes the world they built is a stage set. Dad finally spoke. "We can fix this. We can pay them back. It was never about keeping a secret child," I finished for him. "About laundering money through charity accounts labeled as dependent support." He had no words left. That night the police showed up, not to arrest him that instant, but to take statements. The reporter had forwarded the files to the county prosecutor. The bank had frozen accounts. Clients called looking for restitution. My sister's husband left before dawn. The business lost 2 contracts in a week. The town's sympathy, which had been his currency, evaporated. Revenge isn't fireworks. It's paperwork and patience, and taking back the narrative until the truth replaces the lie. I didn't throw stones or burn houses. I forced them to face their signatures, their emails, their choices. I watched them tally loss the way I had tallied bank statements for years. Watching them feel fragile, without kindness, felt like justice. Afterwards, people came to me. Jordan hugged me in the parking lot of a diner and said, "I don't know what family is anymore, but I'm glad you found me." My niece asked me once, months later, why the crying lady had actually come back. I told her the truth, simply, because some people get tired of being blamed for things they didn't do. I don't know if forgiveness will ever land between me and my mother. I don't expect it, but I sleep without flinching now. I got my name back, not by begging, but by making the ledger match the truth. The last thing I did before I stopped looking back was send them one final envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid of me, standing at the edge of a ferry leaving our town, wind in my hair, a city skyline ahead. On the back, I wrote one word, "Goodbye." They still call me stranger sometimes. I answer when it suits me. Mostly I don't. I'm not the woman who sat with plastic utensils anymore. I'm the one who learned to read a balance sheet and a life, and then closed the book on both. Witty, maybe. I like to think of it as poetic bookkeeping.